Was there a particular art or artist that inspired the book?
This book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier, I had tried it for years as a prose piece, and right around the time that just before I started this, I remember a publisher asking me, saying, you know, graphic novels are becoming a big phenomenon. Would you ever think of doing one? And I said, absolutely not, I hate them. I said, who wants to sit and read a book full of little pictures and try to figure out what they mean? I really hadn't seen any that I liked. But then that winter, Sarah and I were in Paris, and a French illustrator friend of mine showed me some books by some French graphic novelists. And I was blown away by what I saw, because first of all, the art and the stories were equally good in some of these things, which wasn't true of anything I'd seen yet, except for Mouse, which I really respected, although I didn't think that much of the art. I thought it was a wonderful wedding of words and pictures. But in these graphic novels by the French and the Italians, here there were some very serious themes being used, dealt with in a graphic form. And I didn't think of them as comics. I thought of them as more, because the French are, you know, big cinephiles. There was out, to me, as a film watcher, more than a comic book reader, there was a cinematic component there, which I was familiar with. And so we came home from Paris, and Sarah could tell you that my life changed. So did hers. I would go to work in the studio all day and to work on my children's book stuff, and then I would come back to the house at night and sit down at the table in the kitchen and make myself a martini and draw like wildfire. This stuff just started pouring out of and it was just random memories gushing out onto the page with no order to them at all, but all very much as if I was playing a movie in my head of my life. It was all coming back to me in those ways that I've already described, but also coming out on the page in forms that I had learned from watching the films of Louis Buñuel and Roman Polanski and Alfred Hitchcock and Antonioni and Bergman. Those are my favorites. And countless other pieces of shit, and you know, which is important to see too, because then you realize what not to do. But I really like the films of somebody like Buñuel or Polanski, because they really know how to tell a story very, very cleanly, and they follow the dictum of Leo Tolstoy, who said that a book that cannot be understood by a sympathetic 9-year-old boy isn't doing its job. Nowadays we'd say a sympathetic 11-year-old probably, but you know, I'm talking about a certain simplicity and directness that anybody can follow.
Was there a soundtrack for you when you were creating this book?
Yes.
What music was going on in the background, either really in the background or in your head?
Interesting question. I was searching for a soundtrack. Music is really important to me.
Yeah.
In the studio, I play it constantly, but you know, most music, almost every music takes you by the collar and grabs you and tells you what to feel and think about something. And I couldn't find any music to work by for this book at all for months and months. I worked in silence most of the time, which had its own benefits, certainly. But finally, I found the music that was playing behind those films, which was written late in his life by Morton Feldman, a minimalist composer. And I actually have a friend who plays Feldman music to drive people out of his apartment when he doesn't want them to stay too long.
You write that down.
I actually hated it when I first heard it, but the more I listened to it, the more I realized this is a music that has no adjectives. It does not grab you by the collar or throw you around the room or tell you what to think. Aside from a certain tone of creepiness, which was perfectly appropriate to my subject matter, this is music that develops but goes nowhere. It's music that evolves but always stays the same.
Yeah.
Somebody likened it to a constant rocking of a boat up against a wharf. and probably Charon's boat waiting to ferry, souls across the Styx. It became perfect. It became something I listened to constantly. Yeah, so I love this music. To me, I listen to it all the time now when I'm trying to focus. It's my music. I don't expect anybody else to like it.
So I heard that you did some picture books. So I'm curious, what was the process like? You graphic novel, picture book. How different were they? How much alike were they? Did it surprise you in any way that, wow, they're not really different from one another? Or was it like, wow, they're totally different? Different ways of doing this.
Well, I guess I would say two things. First of all, a picture book is very, very compressed story. Although I always feel that the best picture book can be read cover to cover without any text and still be understood. Meaning that I feel that when I do one, my job is to retell the story in pictures, but in a compressed form that gives the whole form and doesn't leave anything critical out. So it's a big job. It's sort of like writing poetry, as opposed to a graphic, which in my experience had no limitations. My publisher never said it has to be 200 pages long, it can't exceed this and that. They gave me the moon, if I wanted it. So I could have had 500 pages, but I think I restrained myself because of my picture book experiences. I appreciate compression.
Yeah.
I appreciate getting rid of the dross. The other thing, of course, is that when you're doing work for children, you have all kinds of brains on you. In language, in subject matter, at least I do. I know there are books out there like reflecting television shows that the reins have been pretty much let go, but I don't agree with that sort of thing. I don't want to talk over a kid's head. I don't want to take away a child. I don't want to frighten a child. I don't want to take away their enthusiasm for life with too much irony. Which I think irony is soul-sucking, and it's everywhere nowadays, and we all have to live with it, and we even have to use it as artists because nobody else understands anything. But nobody understands anything else. But still, there's all these bounds when you're working for kids, which I actually have come to appreciate, and I actually think boundaries are a wonderful thing for any artist to have imposed on him. The best art in the world for a while was being done in behind the wall. Polish theater posters before the wall fell were some of the most amazing stuff being produced. The wall came down, away went all the great art in Poland. There wasn't the great eye of the state trained on them anymore, so that their subversiveness could just pour out and it didn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.